Hello everyone, my name is Jen Nolan and on behalf of Musculoskeletal Australia, I'd like to warmly welcome you to our webinar this evening on the topic of anxiety and depression linked to chronic pain. I'd like to begin, however, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land from which we are broadcasting, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Tonight's webinar is the first one in our 2023 series, in which we have a great list of webinars planned covering conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, complex regional pain syndrome and neck pain, as well as some current issues such as medicinal cannabis and the importance of sleep. If you haven't previously viewed Musculoskeletal Australia's website, I strongly suggest you do so. We have our online shop as well as a wide range of information, videos, recordings of our previous webinars, tools and services, including our national helpline that is available via email and phone on 1800 263 265. Now, I know some of you may be watching a webinar for the first time, so if you have any problems during the webinar, please type a message in the question box. As a backup, the recording of the webinar will be sent out to all registrants and will also be freely available on our website in the next week or so. So if any problem can't be resolved this evening, you will still be able to view the recording. If you're listening via the phone tonight, you may notice a small time delay between the audio and the screen. This is normal, so don't be concerned. Also, our presenter is happy to answer questions at the end of her presentation. However, you can type questions for her at any time. Can I suggest you don't leave your questions to the last minute, as we'll aim to finish no later than 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. I'd also be very grateful if all participants would take a moment to respond to our feedback survey, which will come on your screens at the end of tonight's presentation. Our presenter for this evening is Dr. Jacqui Stanford. Jacqui is a health psychologist who co-leads a team of psychologists and physiotherapists in the delivery of psychology treatment and pain management services at Empower Rehab. She places a strong focus on helping clients improve their function at home, socially and at work. Jacqui is involved in the provision of pain management training to a range of professionals. Jacqui also consults on the WorkSafe clinical panel as a psychology and pain management advisor and has been involved in liaising with GPs and psychologists to help ensure workers receive appropriate treatment that improves their functioning. We're extremely grateful to Jacqui for presenting yet another webinar for us. And without further ado, I'll hand proceedings over to her. Thanks very much, Jacqui.
Thanks so much, Jen. Yeah, so tonight I'm going to talk about anxiety and depression, how it's linked to chronic pain. And I'm going to discuss that, but a bit later on related to an anxiety disorder and a depressive disorder. But I want to make sure we also look at the range of emotions that we experience and how then that can impact our pain, and our pain can impact all of our emotions. Because one of the challenges is for each of you who has pain or know someone who has pain, you will know that it influences how you're able to function. It can impact your mood. It can impact so many different parts of your life. Now the screen isn't clicking across at the moment, so we will work on that. So for each of you who has pain or knows someone with pain, have a think about all the different areas of your life that it impacts. It might be things around the house, social activities, work. And when we can't do the things that we want to be able to do, we can feel frustrated, down, sad, disappointed. Now, one of the challenges is that it doesn't just go that way. Our emotions can also impact our pain. We know that when we have pain for a long time, the chemicals in our body influence that pain. So the fact that we might be more stressed, more worried, concerned, frustrated, increases our stress chemicals, which in turn can increase the pain we experience. Similarly, our endorphins, our body's natural pain reliever, are often reduced if we're not able to do the things that we once enjoyed. And so for people, when they have a significant pain flare-up, they can often be more stressed and worried and find it hard to do things they enjoy, which further impacts on their pain. So when we look at pain, we always need to consider emotions and the relationship both ways. So when we look at emotions, what's the purpose of them? I often ask this of clients, why do we have emotions? What's the purpose? What are they telling us? The way I think about emotions is they're a language. They're a language that's trying to tell us something. They might be trying to tell us that things are good and wonderful, or they might be telling us there's threat or danger. And what happens is when we have an emotional response, there will be a body response that we have first. So if you think about it, if you're really scared, our body goes into a completely different state than if you're relaxed and happy. So when we start to try and work with our emotions more effectively and work with our emotions when we have pain, it's important to learn to understand how they work and how to work with them. I often talk to people as though emotions are one language and our logic and reasoning is another language. Now, if I was to speak English to someone that only spoke Italian, we're not going to get very far. Or if I was only to speak Italian to someone who only speaks English, we're not going to get very far. What we need to do when we're working with our emotions is speak to them through emotional strategies, not logic and reasoning. Many of us would be in a situation where we're worried or concerned about something, and someone might say, don't worry, you'll be fine, you'll get through it. Unfortunately, it doesn't magically take away any worry or concern that we've got. We might logically know we'll get through it. That doesn't necessarily stop us being worried or concerned. So when we think about the language happiness, happiness tells us that things are good, the way we want, there's something lovely that's happened. Compared to, say, when we talk about sadness. Sadness is the emotional response we have to loss. Sadness might be linked to disappointment, might be linked to hurt. Anger is the emotion we have related to some injustice, when things don't go the way they should, when we're betrayed or frustrated, we can feel anger. Worry is an emotion when there's uncertainty and we're concerned about the outcome. And as we learn that each emotion has a language behind it, it's telling us something, what we're able to then do is listen to it. We can listen to it and respond. But one of the most important things when we're listening to an emotion and then looking at how we respond is we need to be able to validate that emotion. Sometimes when there's an emotion there, we try to be positive. And if we're too positive, what it accidentally can do is invalidate an emotion. So for example, if I'm feeling a bit sad or disappointed by something, and I say to myself, at least I've got other things that are going well, at least this is good in my life, what that can accidentally do is invalidate the sadness or the disappointment that's there. And when an emotion gets invalidated or dismissed, it will either get louder to try and get your attention. It will end up nagging at you, poking at you, grabbing your attention. The sadness or the disappointment might keep coming up. Or what we can sometimes do is we put a block there to try and not think about it, because it's not pleasant, sadness or disappointment. But when that block is there for a prolonged period of time, the emotions are still underneath it, and it can stop us feeling the enjoyment or joy in the good things. Because unfortunately, when we block some emotions, it can impact our ability to experience all the lovely, delightful ones. Now, I've never had a client come to me as a psychologist and say, can you please help me feel less happy? I'd like to feel less content in my life. We're more than happy to have those lovely, delightful emotions. What we sometimes find hard to deal with is the sadness, disappointment, frustration, anger, all of those ones that are a bit more unpleasant. However, to have a healthy relationship with emotions, we need all of them. That is part of being human. And as I say to my clients, if I was to find a way to get rid of those, it's basically becoming a robot. We're missing out on the richness. Next slide. So when we look at the continuum of emotions, we can all move up and down this continuum at different stages in our life, and sometimes even in different weeks or days. So if we think about the top level of emotion, healthy, normal functioning, we can get on with life, we can do what we need to do, we get out of bed, we do the tasks, whether it's work or leisure or household, we have a mix of emotions throughout the day. That is what we ideally prefer ourselves to be in. The next level down that we can go back and forth between is where we might have stressors that are occurring, worries. We're reacting to things. Those days where you might feel a bit more irritable, a bit more short-tempered, a bit more worried. These are what we call the sort of common and reversible distress. If we fix the problem, the distress goes away. So if I'm worried about how I'm going to go at the doctor's appointment, when I leave the doctor, that worry might have passed. Or if I'm concerned about all the bills that are coming in, once I've worked out a plan and I've paid them, that ends. When we can be in this stage, that distress or concern or worry will pass, can be solved. Sometimes it might be we're feeling sad, and by talking about it, by crying, by expressing it to a loved one, we can feel lighter again. The next level down is where it's considered there might be a mental injury, an emotional injury. This is where there is more significant functional impairment. It's not just linked to events that are going on right now. You might be struggling to get out of bed or struggling to sleep, or both. You might be looking at the pile of things that need to be doing around the house day in, day out, and just not getting to them. It might be the thought of going out is overwhelming, so you cancel plans regularly and consistently. You might be underperforming at work. When our anxiety or our depression or our emotions impact us, it starts impacting our function. The challenge is, of course, when we're not functioning well, it feeds back in and we can feel more sad or more frustrated or more worried. When we get to the point where it's impacting our function and we're looking around at the things that need to be doing, we should have done this, that needs doing, worried about this and that, it impacts our mood further. And then we can reach the point where someone can be quite unwell. There might be a clinical disorder of major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder, an adjustment disorder with depression and anxiety, or a range of many other disorders. And this is where our functioning is at its lowest. It impacts us significantly, and definitely at this level, and I would say the one above, having some professional support and help is really important, because when we're struggling with our emotions to this degree, it's really hard to pull ourselves out of it, because there's a lot that's going on chemically, emotionally, physically. Now, for each of you who are listening right now, we're all going to be at different stages. There might be some of you go, yeah, okay, my moods fluctuate, but I'm overall doing okay at the moment. Others of you might be going, ooh, yep, that's me. Life's just really hard. I've lost the joy. I'm worried all the time. And so what I'm going to do is talk about a few different things that you can do, whether you are further up the top of the page, at that end of the continuum, or at the moment you're feeling down the bottom of the page and further at that end of the continuum. This might be something that relates specifically to you, or it may also be for people in your life, loved ones, people you care about. So we're going to look at what we can do with emotions, and then we're going to look more specifically when there is a disorder. But before I go into that, I've got a poll, a question that I want as many of you as can to answer it. Because when we talk about all those different emotions that I mentioned, we don't have a single emotion at one time. So for how many of you have had a day where you've had seemingly contradictory emotions? So within the one day, you might have felt frustrated and disappointed, happy and thankful. Or it might have been you were worried and peaceful in the same day. So if everyone can just jump on now and say, yep, I've had that experience, I get that. They seem to contradict. How can I be happy and sad? How can I be worried and peaceful? How can I be hopeful and disappointed? And I've experienced that. Or if any of you go, no, I've never noticed that. I've never noticed having different emotions at the same time. It might even be today, thinking back over today. What emotions, what feelings did you experience today? Are there some that you go, that is funny to have had both of those? Now let's have a look. How many of us have had that experience, finishing up the poll and seeing how many of us have had that experience of emotions that don't seem to be consistent. Absolutely. So the vast majority of us have noticed that yes, emotions aren't singular, simple, neat and tidy. And this is one of the things that makes us harder to know what to do with them. And so if we continue on to the next slide and think about it, what I think about this as is the fruit salad of emotions. If we go ahead and think about it of going, hang on the one day we can have a whole mix of different things. So if you step back though, and think about it, here's a couple of examples. It might be for you love being out in the garden. Today was a beautiful day. I was in an office for part of the day, but I was lucky enough to be able to ride a little bit today. Sun was shining, there was a beautiful breeze. So some of you may have been out in your garden today. You're enjoying it, you're thankful, you're content, you're proud, and you're frustrated because it hurts to do as much as you want to be able to do, or you can't reach that branch and prune that bit, or you're going to need to ask for some help to finish it off. So within the one activity of gardening, there can be all those different emotions that someone can experience. Or it may be you have a medical appointment tomorrow. You're feeling uncertain. Tomorrow morning you wake up, you're worried. You're concerned. You're also feeling hopeful. You're thankful for a great doctor that you have a relationship with. So even while waiting for an appointment, there can be this whole fruit salad of emotions. When we recognize our emotions can be a fruit salad, it can help us tease them apart. Because as I said before, emotions want to be heard and listened to. So when we can realize, I'm thankful for my doctor. I am hopeful for a good outcome. And I'm worried there won't be one. And I'm feeling uncertain. If you notice, one of the key words that I used is the word and. When we allow these emotions to sit together and have an and, the emotions can feel heard and validated. And when they feel heard and validated, they can become a bit quieter or may not feel the need to be so loud. What we can then do is ask the emotion what it needs. What does the worry need? What does the thankfulness need? When we ask ourselves, what does this part of the emotional fruit salad need? We might find there are a few different things that are helpful in addressing it. I'm worried about how the appointment's going to go. I'm going to focus on deep breaths and engaging in activity until the appointment comes. I'm going to thank my GP when I'm there for what they provide, the support that's there. I'm going to focus on the good things and the hope that I have. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm worried, and I might call a friend or speak to a partner or a loved one and share that worry so I don't feel like I'm carrying it alone. When we can address each of those components and address what that emotion needs, they can become less loud and less overwhelming. Similarly, with the garden, we can focus on that contentment and thankfulness. And we can acknowledge that it's hard not being able to do everything we want to be able to do. And it's difficult accepting that sometimes we need help. When we can allow all of that to be an and, we can enjoy more of the richness, and the sadness, frustration and worries often don't build up as much. Now, the challenge for some of you though is our emotional cup can be really full. And so another thing that I find helpful to think about when we're processing emotions is, how full is my cup of emotions? I have never worked in hospitality, and possibly for a good reason, because I am not very good at carrying a full cup. If we go to the next slide and have a look at it, you may have been to a cafe and you may have seen the latte. I don't know how waitresses and waiters do it. The cup is not only full, it's actually bulging over the top a little bit. Now, if I was to carry a cup that's full, I would probably spill it without even being bumped. But for some of you, if you've ever worked in hospitality, you may have gone, yep, I can carry that, that's fine. But if a cup is that full, it doesn't take much for it to spill a bit. a little bump, having to sidestep quickly, and that latte, that cup of emotions might spill. Now that's a latte. We can mop that up, get a napkin. The problem is when that's our cup of emotions, when our emotional cup is full, it doesn't take much for it to spill out. So you might be muddling along okay, you're a bit stressed, a bit worried, a bit sad. And there's some good bits, you're happy and you're thankful. And then you get some more bad news. And all of a sudden, I'm at my limit. I'm full, and it comes out. Now, for each of us, the way that comes out can vary. For some of you, it might be sadness, tears. Others, when you're full of, your cup of emotions is full, you might be irritable, frustrated, short-tempered, or sometimes a mix of all of it. You might withdraw, become quiet, not want to interact. The problem is when our emotional cup is full, not only do we spill easily, if you picture a waiter going through a cafe, it's exhausting. It takes more concentration. It takes more effort. And so what we want to be doing is processing our emotions so that that cup isn't quite so full. It's not quite so heavy. It means if we get bumped by the realities of life, we can kind of cope with it. And the way we empty our cup, unfortunately, it's not as enjoyable as drinking a coffee. The way we need to empty our cup is to process the emotions. That can be done by talking about them with someone, sharing them. Some people find journaling and writing about what we're feeling helpful. Might be sitting and feeling. It might be being mindful, tuning in and noticing and acknowledging them. For each of us, it's different, and it's different with each emotion. And this is where, for those of you who go, yeah, my cup's full, I don't know how to empty it. This is where, regardless of where you are on that continuum of emotions, psychologists can help you learn how to label, process, feel those emotions so you're not carrying quite so much. The hard thing is, often people say to me, I'm too scared if I take the lid off, what if it never stops? I've been a psychologist for 25 years now, and I have never met someone whose emotions don't stop. What I've found though is when your cup's really full, the first bit can feel really overwhelming processing it. Thankfully, as we have lower cups, it can be a lot quicker, easier, not as uncomfortable. And as we do it, we develop a healthier, stronger relationship with our emotions where we can be sad and acknowledge it, and then be thankful and feel those other emotions as well. So we need to process our emotions, we need to acknowledge them, we need to validate them. Emotions are always okay. We need to speak to them with emotional language, which is, hey, you're feeling sad? Feel it and process it. So there's a few thoughts around the emotions that we all experience, from infant to old age, whether you have pain or no pain. Every single one of us can experience the fruit salad of emotions or the cup of emotions being full. What I want to spend the next part is talking about more when we talk about an anxiety disorder and when the anxiety gets more significant, and also when our mood gets lower and it becomes more like depression. So if we move on and talk about anxiety. Anxiety is the emotion that is characterized by feelings of tension. Our body can feel tighter. We have worried thoughts. What if? How am I going to cope? And our physical changes can happen. Our heart rate can be faster. It's harder to switch off. It's harder to relax. Now, that coming and going is okay. Anxiety is designed to protect us from danger and allow us to react to emergencies. We want that fight and flight response many of you may have heard of, where we can run faster, which is great if we're running from a brown grizzly bear, but when the thing that's making us anxious is our health, we can't run from our health. So what can happen is we get stuck with this feeling of tension, worry, and physical changes that can build and take over. Some of the really common drivers to anxiety can be worry and uncertainty. And so what we want to do is look at, well, what can we do with our worry and uncertainty? If we look at uncertainty, this will often show through unanswered questions. Now think for a moment. Did any of you wake up this morning and ask whether you like coffee? Just so you know, I didn't. I think I might have woken up by the time I got to the coffee machine because I love coffee. Some of you get ill. No, I didn't ask myself that. I never like coffee. Might be some of you here tonight who go, yeah, some days I like coffee, some I don't. So this morning I did ask that. We only ask a question when there's uncertainty. And the problem is when we become anxious, there can be so much uncertainty. If we think about it related to our health, we might be worried what the side effects of medication can be. How's it going to impact us? What's the next step? How's it going to impact what we can do at home? How are others going to cope with the fact that we're letting them down again? We're worried about whether we're going to sleep tonight because of the pain. So there can be multiple worries that all sort of link together and become a snowball of worry. Or it might be worry about a relationship that we've got and some breakdown in that. So things that you worry about when you have pain may relate specifically to the pain, or there might be other worries. Either way, it's our one worry system that turns on. And so when we have unanswered questions, they often go on a broken record loop. And that can lead us to feeling more overwhelmed, more anxious, and more concerned. The analogy I think about is the monster under the bed. Now, when my kids were little, if they were worried about a monster, I'm not just going to say, don't worry about it. Don't think about it. There's no monster. Don't look under the bed, but there's no monster. Avoiding thinking about our worries, unfortunately, doesn't make them go away. What is often more effective is to look under the bed. Is there a monster? What is under the bed? What do we need to do about it? And so we want to acknowledge when we have an unanswered question is, I don't know. In a moment, I'll talk about the worry management questions. Before we even get to those, we want to say, hey, I don't know. What I do know is, and then we want to focus on what we do know and what we can control. Because when we have worry and things that we know and things that we control together, the worry doesn't become as overwhelming. When we have worry and uncertainty with no strategy or no anchor, we can feel like we're being tossed around in the waves by those worries and concerns. So when you notice your mind asking all these questions, what can be helpful is to write them down because they're going around your mind anyway. And what you might notice is, you might think you've got 100 of them, but you'll notice they come in clusters. There might be 7 versions of really the same worry. If I'm struggling this much with pain now, how am I going to be in 5 years? That might have 5 different versions. And what it can make it do is feel a bit less overwhelming, still a lot to worry about, still a lot of thoughts, but to go, hey, there's 3 main themes here that I'm concerned about. What that can do is allow us then to go into the worry management approach. To ask, what am I worried about? What's this theme of worry, or what specific concern do I have today? How am I going to go to the doctors tomorrow? What am I going to be like in 5 years? Can I keep living independently? What does my partner think about the fact I keep asking for help? I don't know what your worries are. They'll be different for each of you. We want to acknowledge what we're worried about though, because often we're not clear. It's a vague, fuzzy worry. And when something's vague and fuzzy, it's harder to do something about it. Because what we want to then do is go, well, what can I do something about? Now, most worries we have, if not all, there's a little bit of something we can do about it and a bit that we can't. Otherwise, we would have just fixed it if it was that simple. So we firstly want to go of what can we do about it and focus on problem solving that component, addressing what we can influence. Then what we want to do is think about it in a context of how bad it is and how likely it is. Because our worry brain, if it wants to get loud, can convince us that something is absolutely catastrophic and 100% guaranteed going to happen. And when we step back, we go, no, it'd be pretty bad if this thing happened. But it's not guaranteed. I think it's about a 60% chance it's going to happen. Which, of course, if something's 60% chance likely to happen, it's 40% chance not going to happen. Our worry brain tends to forget about that bit though. And so we want to think about how bad something will be. And this is not about minimizing how bad. Some of your worries might be 9 out of 10 bad. There are some things we're worried about that would be horrible. But there might be some other worries that we have that when we look at it, we go, yeah, actually, in the scheme of life, that's not that big of a deal. It's still concerning, but it might be a 3 out of 10. What we then again want to go is, well, I've done what I can about it. This concern is 60% likely chance of happening, and it'll be pretty awful. So what supports, what other resources can I bring in to help me with that? That may have been part of your initial solution, but when we get to this point, we want to be thinking again about what supports we can bring in. So for those of you who worry and feel anxious, whether that's at the higher end of that continuum or the lower end, looking at how we can manage our questions, how we can manage our worries, what we can control and influence can be really helpful. When we then look at our lowered mood, depression. Depression is a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest in things. This can be linked to grief and loss. Now, in our society, we often talk about grief and loss in terms of bereavement. Someone dies close to me and I experience grief. But grief also can be disenfranchised grief. And the reason we use that term, it's grief that cannot be always acknowledged. And sometimes we don't acknowledge it to ourselves. So for some of you where your pain or your health conditions is impacting on your independence, there will be grief around that loss of independence. There might be your health is impacting on your ability to do that big trip that you planned, and there is a grief that you'll never get to do that trip. Any loss that we have, the feeling is grief. And if we're not processing the sadness, the grief and the loss, again, it can build up and fill that cup. And that can sometimes be why people experience depression. One of the challenges with depression, if you think about it, I said it involves sadness and loss of interest in things. We can lose our motivation. And when we lose our motivation, it makes things harder to do. We may not do them. We feel more disconnected, which makes us feel flatter. We don't follow through on things. There's more things that should be done, have to be done, and we're not doing them. So what do we do about sadness, loss of interest? Firstly, we need to work out, is there grief and loss? How do we process the sadness? Going back to the strategies I was saying before. From a motivation perspective, though, it's really important to distinguish between the difference of feeling motivated and being motivated. Now, when we have the feeling of motivation, it's lovely. It gives us the energy, the drive to be able to do things. Things are easier. But there's many things each of us do, not because we feel motivated, but we are motivated. For example, some of you may be different to me, but I very rarely feel like cleaning my house. It's definitely not something I enjoy. I've got friends who enjoy it more than I do. So I don't feel motivated for it very often. I am motivated to do it though, because I prefer a tidy house. I don't like, if I want to relax, I don't want to like looking at mess. So while that feeling and urge won't be there, there is a motivation or a drive still to do it. And when our mood is lower, we need to tap into that more so rather than the feeling, because the feeling goes on holiday. Now, for some of you, you might have gone, yeah, I can relate to that. So I'm going to vacuum, or I'm going to wipe down the benches, or I'm going to clean the toilet. Oh, I just noticed when I was wiping the benches, oh, there's a bit of something on the wall too. I might wipe that down. And sometimes when we start doing the behavior, the feeling kicks in a little bit more. Not always, but sometimes. There's many things we all do in life because we're motivated to have it done or do it rather than feel like it. Whether that's going to work because you're committed, not because you feel like it. Whether I said housework, catching up with certain people, I don't know. We don't need to feel motivated though to do it. So when we're feeling lower, when we're more depressed, what we want to do is start with small amounts of activity that are manageable for us and do it regularly. Otherwise, we can end up with the boom bust. We do a whole lot of something and then we crashed from it and we go, I'm never going out and socializing again. Well, Jacqui said it's good to do, you know, pleasant activities. So I went out into the garden, I did it all day long and never doing that again. And when we look at activities, it's really, really important to look at pleasant activities, enjoyable ones. They release the chemicals, the endorphins, the feel-good chemical in our body. What's also important is the achievement and valued activities as well. So for example, if I enjoy a bubble bath and I did that all day long, but never cleaned my house or paid my bills, I'm probably going to be stressed still. We need a mix of the practical achievement value ones alongside pleasant activities each day to help manage our depression. Exercise. We know exercise is really good for our mood. Now, we're talking about this in the context of pain though. So really important that's guided by medical or physical treaters. We know that exercise in itself can release those endorphins, the feel-good ones, and please do something you enjoy. I remember many years ago speaking to a gentleman who was doing swimming because he was told it was good to exercise and good for his pain. And when I spoke to him, he's a middle-aged man who'd never learnt to swim. He was petrified of water. So the poor man was trying to go to swimming lessons as an adult to learn because he thought it would be good. He was so relieved when we said, no, a walk, any exercise, movement is good for us. And the more you enjoy it, and definitely don't be stressed by it, the better for your mood. So really important to be getting that activities, and it can be about scheduling them into your diary across the week. What we want to do though is realize we're not alone in all of this. We want to utilize the supports that we have around us. Now, this can be practical support and emotional support. This might be professional support, family support, or friends or neighbours. When we look at practical support can be assistance with tasks. It might be transport somewhere, attending an appointment with you, particularly if you find it hard to concentrate and take on information. It can be great to have someone there with those practical help. Really important to also have emotional support. The being there, they might come to the appointment just to hold your hand, to be the companion. Or it might be listening to your concerns or worries. What we know is each of us as humans benefit when we have practical and emotional support. Now, the challenge is when I speak to many people about this is, yeah, but I don't want to burden them. I use it too much. Or they feel like it dominates the relationship, talking about it. So wherever possible, it's really helpful in relationships to have some degree of mutual support. Now, mutual support doesn't mean equal. If your health, your pain, your anxiety, your depression at the moment means your needs are this big, that's okay. Your needs are this big. You might be able to also listen to someone else and support them with their worry or concern that is not as big as yours, but it's still meeting theirs. When we can have relationships where there can be give and take, that's not point scoring, it's connecting. That communal coping, that connection can help us feel supported and feel more like we're contributing and we're getting that help. So have a think. Are you better off learning to ask for some more help? Are you someone who finds it hard and pushes through and is stubborn and independent? Or are you someone who goes, yeah, I do tend to talk a lot about what's going on and probably would be good to find out a bit more if there's anything I can do. I don't have a lot of capacity, but maybe I can do something. Or that might even vary between different relationships that you have. But when we can access that support along with our own strategies, it can help with our anxiety and depression further. The challenge is though, all of this anxiety, depression and emotions becomes extra challenging when you've got pain. When you have a health condition, there might be flare-ups and setbacks. This could be autoimmune, it could be due to activity, it could be due to another diagnosis. For 100 different reasons for you, there might be something that makes you feel like you're going back. Some people have said to me, it feels like a snakes and ladders game. I use all this effort to climb up the rungs of a ladder and feel like I'm making progress, and then I just get this news or this flare up that feels like I'm going down the snake and starting again. This is where that extra support can be really, really helpful, because it's challenging for those of you with chronic conditions that lead to 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or sometimes feeling like 5 steps backwards. Also, I've said it's really important to do activities that you enjoy and help you achieve and are valued. I remember speaking to someone once who said to me, well, you said it's good to do things that are enjoyable, so I gardened all day, but I couldn't get out of bed the next day, I was too sore. Unfortunately, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. What we need to do is find out the amount of an activity that is within our capacity, physically and functionally, that helps our mood. And so you may be better off if it's gardening or cooking or catching up with friends or going for a drive, walking the beach, whatever it is you enjoy, to think about, okay, I'm going to do little buckets of this every day rather than once a week. I might do it in 10-minute blocks or half-hour blocks. And as your health fluctuates, the amount of that may need to change as well. So we need to be making sure that we're the right amount of activity. One of the challenges, though, that I see for most people with chronic health conditions, and if they're experiencing depression and anxiety, many of you will have many different treaters, family, friends, opinions, internet, all giving you different advice. And I don't know about you, but if I get 10 bits of advice, I'm going to get more confused, more uncertain, which can then lead to more worry. What can be really helpful with treaters is when we collaborate with each other about you, with you at the centre. I would encourage you to ask your treaters, for those of you who have multiple people involved, can you please speak to my psychologist or GP? Can you guys organise a case conference or a chat where you can coordinate? Because one of the things that can happen is accidentally we don't communicate well, or it might be by letter because it can be challenging accessing each other. But ideally, any treatment or professional support is working together towards your goals. You don't want to have psychologist goals and physio goals and doctor's goals. You want to have your goals where each of us come around and support you in that. Now, tonight I've focused on, from my perspective as a psychologist, of some of the things you can do with your mood. Of course, there are medications and other interventions that can be helpful to manage mood and emotions. And if you feel like what I've talked about isn't enough for what's going on for you, I strongly encourage you to speak to your GP about what's going on and what different pathways there are. Because the more we can put into with each other as a community and get those supports to improve our mental health and support each other, we can enjoy life the best we can with pain and some anxiety and depression. So thank you for listening, and now's an opportunity for you to ask any questions that I might be able to help you with.
Thanks very much, Jacqui. Again, a wonderful presentation and so interesting. I was taking plenty of notes, not to just raise a few points with you now, but also a good reminder, I think, for anyone just about, and especially I think when people are suffering from a chronic health condition or chronic pain, we forget about the sort of the psychology, the mental, emotional side of things, because people get so sort of preoccupied, understandably, with the physical sort of in that state. So I think it was a really good reminder to just really, that, as you sort of described at the beginning, the bi-directional impact, how pain can influence the emotions and the emotions can influence the experience of pain. So that was fantastic. Yes, if anyone has any questions, please type them into the question box now. I think it was really a good reminder also, that thing about not sort of suppressing people's emotions and feelings and really trying to sort of think about what they were telling us and so on. I love the fruit salad of emotions. That's so true. In any one day, people can go through a whole range of different emotions and so on. And I think that's, I suppose one thing that really came through in your presentation was just how normal this all is. I think sometimes people can feel so alone if they're feeling, down or feeling angry or sad and whatever. So to actually hear you talk about it, and for people to know that actually it's quite common, it's quite normal, it's in the whole sort of process of living with a chronic health condition or chronic pain, I think can be reassuring. It probably takes some practice to actually sort of get used to sort of thinking like this, but I think that's I think if people, hopefully, and again, just to remind everyone, this is being recorded, so people can watch it as many times as they like. If you haven't taken notes this evening, then you might like to re-watch it, because you can also stop the recording at any time and make any notes if that helps at all. I think another good point that you really made was that thing about feeling motivated and being motivated. I loved how you sort of described it about you weren't sort of feeling motivated about cleaning the house, but you were motivated to do it because you like a tidy house. And I think that distinction was really helpful as well. There's been a couple of questions that have come through. Someone made the comment about, you know, a person can have a facade that hides the depression and pain that you're suffering. So what's your comment about that, that so many people actually sort of carry on and present as if everything's fine and it's not? So what would you suggest in that sort of situation?
And I think that's really common, partly because it's a really vulnerable space, our pain and our emotions. And people can often let us down when we share some of it. And so when we are vulnerable and we express some of it, if that's not handled well, whether it's from our childhood, we learn these patterns as well, it's really scary to trust it again. So that facade is really common to build up. What I would generally encourage people to do, see if you can find 1 or 2 safe people. Don't go to the top level emotional sharing first though. I talk to people, trust is to be built. Start with a little worry and see if you've got someone who can meet you there and acknowledge it and build that trust over time. Now, I do have many clients over the years who find that they need to get that practice and trust with me as a professional first, because they find it hard enough to validate their own emotions. If we don't have the ability to validate, we put the facade on for ourselves, we can get very good. We need, first of all, to be able to listen to it ourselves before we're going to be able to connect with someone. So when you said, Jen, it takes practice, you could Google list of emotions. There are so many charts and lists of emotions out there that you might just go, I don't know what I'm feeling. And you might read through it and you go, oh, that's what I'm feeling. And it can help build your vocabulary. When you are then sharing with someone, it can be helpful to say what you're actually wanting. Because in society, we generally jump into fix-it mode way too quick, or positive optimistic mode way too quick, because we don't like seeing someone suffer. So if someone's worried, we'll tend to go, oh, you'll be fine. Rather than going, I'm really sorry this is tough and you're worried at the moment. Way more valuable to be able to do that. So to say to someone, hey, I don't want advice right now, I just would really appreciate it if you could listen. I feel like I just need to share a little bit. But to reduce that facade, start small, pick someone's trustworthy and practice rather than go the big guns for the big one, because it is really a vulnerable space.
Yep, great. Jacqui, someone's asked whether there's any sort of self-help books that you could recommend for emotional intelligence, or people just, you know, feeling more comfortable with their emotions and their feelings. Is there any that come to mind, or maybe even if you let me know after the webinar and we could put it out when we send out the recording to people. So do you find that if people sort of are able to do their own sort of homework in this space, that's helpful?
Definitely. And if you think back to the continuum, I think all of us can benefit from more vocabulary. Our kids can benefit from more. If you think about, and there's a lot more happening now in school systems around things like the catastrophizing scale of helping kids put big emotions into a context or language. So if we're in that top part of that continuum where we've got a healthy fluctuating, it's easier to learn about emotions then because they're often not as big and scary. So we could all benefit from labeling them, listening to them. In that next category, definitely problem solving. I think once you get down to the impacting your function significantly, it's really hard to do it yourself. There are online courses out there and resources, though, that can be more workbooky. But I would say most of us, if we're feeling depressed, it's really hard to change your thinking. Otherwise, we would have just changed it, because none of us enjoy that feeling. So once you're impacting your function significantly and it's not bouncing back, I would then be inclined to say professional help is more appropriate.
And Jacqui, if someone was really feeling very sort of low to the point of you know, doing some sort of self-harm, would you suggest that they ring Lifeline? You know, that would be the most well-known, or Beyond Blue. There's a couple of resources out there for people who really, when they get in their very low moments, they can seek help 24/7, can't they?
Definitely. Lifeline, fantastic. As as that crisis, in that moment when you don't know which way to turn, really valuable. If that doesn't even feel like enough, you can always just go to an emergency department at a hospital. If that feeling of I can't trust myself is there, they're two options. And it's the same with loved ones. If you have a loved one who's going through it, it can be really challenging. One of the things that can be really helpful in that is to give them a choice about how to go about it, but not to carry it alone. So if you have a loved one who's feeling like they might hurt themselves or kill themselves, what can be really powerful is don't carry that alone. Hey, we need to go to the hospital. Shall we go to this hospital or this hospital? Because, or let's call Lifeline now, so that we're working with it with professional support as well.
Yes, and of course that's, you know, the extreme end of the whole experience. So, but I think it's always worth just mentioning and reminding people about that. Someone's asked a question: how do we balance the issue of resilience and recognising pain/emotions? Which is, that's a good point, because people sort of attempt to be resilient, but then they've also got to work out what that right balance is.
It's really interesting, because my first thought was we need to acknowledge the pain, the emotions in order to be resilient. I actually think they are key skills of resilience rather than bravado or pushing through. So I think when we're resilient, there's an acknowledgement of challenges, and that allows us to keep going and move forward. And it's the dance. Now, one of the things when people are worried, you know, I need to understand, acknowledge the emotions, but I don't want to take up all day, put a time limit on it. Can be actually work. For 5 minutes today, I'm actually just going to sit here and acknowledge the challenges that are overwhelming me at the moment. It's amazing how long 5 minutes is, because most of us go, oh, I feel miserable. Oh, try and push it away. So resilience to me has to include some acknowledgement of emotions, because we need that in order to be flexible with what we're continuing on with. And so when we have chronic health conditions, it's unfortunately not a straight path. It's often a very bumpy path, and we need to be able to do the steps forward or go up the ladder as well as cope with the snakes down the ladder.
And of course, someone's also asking about sort of when you can't quite get the support you need from family members and friends and so on. I mean, there are support services out there. I mean, Musculoskeletal Australia has a helpline with trained nurses on that helpline, but also in the number is 1-800-263-265. I'm sure there's other organisations such as Pain Australia and so on that would also provide a bit of support. Someone said, interesting what you, sorry, go on, Jacqui.
Touching on that, that's one of the challenges people often have when they don't feel like they've got support in the family. It can be really hard not to have it in your immediate world. And again, that's a grief. If that's unable to be met and you've tried and you've problem solved and you just get let down and disappointed, that's really hard. And so there's an extra emotion you've then got on top of the other things that you were finding hard. But unfortunately, some people don't have the capacity to provide the support. Some can learn, some do it naturally, but for some of you, there's no one in my world that can, and that's where, as Jen said, those extra resources may not be the same, or they're not the same as having someone you live with being able to meet that need. However, accessing a range of different supports can make things feel more manageable.
As someone comments, I think sometimes people can be too hard on themselves and feel guilty, which can make us more depressed and go into a bit of a downward spiral. So I guess your message is to sort of just go a bit easier on yourself.
Self-compassion. And this is the thing, to me, the acknowledgement, and if you remember I said, validate the emotions, which means it's okay to feel X. It's okay. It's not saying it's great and delightful that I'm sad. It's saying it's okay that I'm sad. So even that sentence, it's okay that I feel X, is a really powerful way of validating it and not being so hard, rather than we should be what we often do, a common narrative I hear is, I feel sad and frustrated, I can't do everything, but I should be thankful because I've got so many good things, I've got these lovely grandkids and my garden's lovely, so I should be thankful. It's like, hang on, you can be thankful, remember the fruit salad, and sad.
Someone says they have a habit of trying to get all the jobs around the house done before they spend happy, pleasant time on things that they like doing. So how do they manage this habit?
Very common. Let's do all the shoulds, the have tos, tick the boxes, and then I deserve, probably might be part of your vocabulary, to relax. I would say as a habit, creating it can be actually useful doing it on paper first rather than looking around. Time block it for a couple of weeks and give yourself an experiment. If for the next 2 weeks I do productive pleasure throughout the day, how do I feel at the end of the day, the end of the week? Sometimes when it's written down, one of the things I often find is clients will make an appointment with me and turn up on time. But if they make an appointment with themselves, they don't always give it the same respect. Or a pleasant activity for themselves. I'm like, call it an appointment. You've got an appointment with reading your book or whatever that is for you. That is just as important for your health. It's preventative for depression. It's protective. It does so much. It's actually your medicine. I often talk to clients about that pleasant activity is your antidepressant. So if you want to leave it to the end of the day, it's going to be a lot more depression you've got to deal with than if you can take that regularly and consistently. So maybe it's alternating or finding a mix between the day can make that a bit more helpful and build a different habit.
And Jacqui, someone said, by managing the chronic pain, does it help the anxiety and depression? Well, I suppose that's where you started with the bi-directional sort of diagram. But yeah, so by managing the pain, does it help the anxiety and depression?
It definitely can, but what we find most helpful, so as Jen said at the start, our clinic, we have pain management and we have a lot of psychology input as well. Often if you can shift a bit of both, helps the other one. Because they're bi-directional, any shift in one can make a difference. Sometimes you need extra help with either the pain or extra help with the anxiety or depression. But definitely any improvement in one can result in improving the other. The thing to be aware of though is it's not necessarily an instant fix. Sometimes we'd all like a quick fix, actually, not some of us. I think we'd all like a quick fix. It might be over weeks that it takes, and not years, weeks, where you're building up the strategy to manage your emotions and you're improving your function, your engagement in life and managing your pain better will feed back in, absolutely.
And look, maybe this is a bit of an issue for the health system, but someone made the comment that often a lot of GPs don't have the time to identify people's sort of anxiety and depression linked to their chronic health condition or pain. Also, some psychologists may not know how to particularly treat people and be trauma informed. What's the solution, when there's not a lot of depth of support, Jacqui?
That is why I'm going to keep doing training and try and help see what we can do. Things are shifting, but I agree. GPs, the structure there are under a lot of time constraints, and it takes a lot of vulnerability for you as a patient to go to a GP, I'm worried or stressed. A strategy, so first of all, try and find a GP who has the time to listen. It can be helpful to write down that you want to talk to them about it, because sometimes in our mind we might go in, I want to talk to them about it, I'm going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it, and then you walk out and you haven't. If it's written down, is a strategy that can help. In terms of trauma, pain, health-informed psychologists, I agree. I'm actually a health psychologist by training. There are a few of us out there to really look at how psychology and health interact. So finding someone who has some training or experience in that is really important. The Australian Psychological Society has a resource that allows some access to some of those. What we're seeing a lot more now, and this is the challenge for each of you, but it's an opportunity, consumers, clients are starting to drive what they want more, which I think is exciting because you know yourselves better than anyone ever can. And doing that research, finding a GP who's happy if you go, hey, I'd really like to see someone who can help me manage this condition from an emotional perspective. Can you please refer me? Having that ability. Now, that can be hard. I understand that completely. But the more we can all collaborate, so any health professional you've got where you feel like you've got that space, they may be able to come alongside you as well.
And this will finish there. I think we've got through most of the questions. Apologies for anyone who made a comment or question we weren't able to get to. But Jacqui, there's lots of comments in here, just sort of saying thanks for a great presentation. People particularly loved your analogies, which I think were fantastic in really helping to have a very practical sort of picture in your mind of different things you were trying to get across. So a great presentation as always. You're just such a great supporter of Musculoskeletal Australia, so we're eternally grateful for that. So thanks again, Jacqui, and thanks to everyone, to all the audience who joined this evening. You will be receiving the recording of the webinar, and as I said, you can watch it as many times as you like and pass it on to friends and family members as well, because it can also help them to understand certain things that you're dealing with and going through. So this will certainly be a great resource in an ongoing way. So on that note, could I ask everyone to fill in the exit survey, which will come on your screen shortly. It's right on 8 p.m. So thanks again, Jacqui. Thanks everyone for joining tonight, and good night.